There is something miraculous that happens when a person discovers, maybe for the first time in their life, that they can influence their own internal world, not through force, not through willpower, not through discipline or punishment, but through something as gentle and accessible as breath. Most people go through their entire lives feeling like passengers inside their own bodies, carried by stress, pushed by fear, pulled by urgency. They wait for external circumstances to improve before they allow themselves to relax. They hope the world will slow down so they can finally feel calm. But the world rarely slows. This is why breathing becomes more than a technique. It becomes liberation. Let me tell you about someone who understood this in a way that changed the trajectory of his entire life. His name was Kareem. He was in his early 40s, a father of 3, a man who worked tirelessly to provide for his family. On the outside, he was calm, composed, steady. But inside, he carried a storm so deep that even the quietest days felt loud. When he first visited me, I asked what brought him in. He hesitated, then said, "I think I've forgotten how to exist peacefully." It wasn't depression. It wasn't panic attacks. It wasn't a crisis. It was the slow erosion of ease, a gradual chipping away of calm until all that was left was demand, responsibility, pressure. This is a more common form of suffering than people realize. The suffering of someone who never fully breaks down, yet never fully feels okay either. Someone who shows up for everyone else, but quietly loses themselves in the process. When I taught him the physiological sigh, he didn't say much at first. He simply tried it. Inhale, inhale again, long exhale. He repeated it, and then again. And on the 4th breath, something inside him cracked open. He didn't cry loudly. His body didn't collapse, but the muscles around his eyes softened, and he put a hand on his chest like he was recognizing its existence for the first time in years. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I didn't know my body was this tired." And that is the truth for so many people. We don't realize how deeply fatigued we are because fatigue becomes our normal. Stress becomes our baseline. Pressure becomes our identity. Breath reveals the truth. It strips away the armor. It shows us what we've been carrying and what we no longer need to carry. There is something else I want to share, something I wish more people understood. Your breath tells the story your words cannot. Children who grow up in fear often breathe in silence, barely expanding their ribs, as if hoping their presence can remain unnoticed. Adults who experience trauma often breathe high in the chest, preparing to run or defend at any moment. People living with grief often breathe in irregular patterns, their breath catching unpredictably. And then there are those who live in constant productivity, their breath fast, clipped, functional, as if relaxation itself is inefficient. This is why changing your breath changes more than your physiology. It changes your identity. It shifts your relationship with yourself. I remember a woman named Selena, a world-class athlete, unbelievably talented, driven beyond belief. But beneath all her strength, she carried a fear she never spoke about, the fear of slowing down. She equated rest with weakness. She equated stillness with regression. She believed she had to outrun her own vulnerability. When I introduced her to this technique, she resisted, not because she didn't believe in it, but because the idea of softening terrified her more than the idea of failure. "This feels like losing control," she said. And I told her the truth. This is not losing control. This is learning a different kind of control, one that isn't born from force but from understanding. She tried the breath, slowly, hesitantly, and each exhale seemed to dismantle a belief she had built her entire life around. After a few minutes, she said something remarkable. "I never knew control could feel gentle. That is the paradox. Real control has nothing to do with tension. Real control is calm. It is steady. It is grounded. The physiological sigh gives you access to that groundedness, even when your life feels like it's coming apart at the seams." But let me take you deeper into the science for a moment, not in a cold, academic way, but in the way science exists inside real human experience. When you do the double inhale, something extraordinary happens inside your lungs. Your alveoli, millions of small sacs that collapse under stress, suddenly open. When they open, your brain receives a signal that carbon dioxide is releasing, that oxygen is stabilizing, that danger is no longer imminent. And your nervous system shifts gears from fight or flight to rest and digest. Imagine your entire body switching from survive to heal in a matter of seconds. That's what this breath does. Children instinctively do it after crying. Adults instinctively do it after panic. Animals instinctively do it after escaping danger. Your brain has always known this breath. You are not learning something new. You are remembering something ancient. I want to take you now to a memory from my early career, a time when I didn't yet understand the power of breath the way I do now. A college student named Maya came to see me. She was brilliant, funny, creative, but she lived with constant overwhelm. Her thoughts moved faster than her ability to process them, and her breath struggled to keep up. During one session, she became so overwhelmed that she began shaking uncontrollably. I froze, not because I didn't care, but because, at that time, many years ago, I hadn't fully grasped that sometimes the most powerful intervention isn't a psychological technique, it's a physiological one. She kept saying, "I can think, I can't think," and I realized she didn't need to think, she needed to breathe. I asked her to look at me. I demonstrated the breath, slow, intentional, stable. And she followed. Inhale. Inhale again. Long exhale. Her hands steadied. Her eyes softened. Her mind cleared. And then she whispered something that changed the way I practiced forever. I didn't know I could stop my own panic. At that moment I understood something profound. Breath is empowerment. Not metaphorically. Literally, it gives power back to the person who feels powerless. It gives control back to the person who feels overwhelmed. It gives clarity back to the person who feels lost. It gives presence back to the person who feels scattered. Breath is the doorway to self-regulation, the skill that determines whether you face life with fear or with resilience. Speaking of resilience, let me tell you about someone who embodied it in a way that was almost poetic. Her name was Noor, a young woman who had been through more than most people experience in a lifetime. She had endured heartbreak, loss, betrayal, and the collapse of dreams she once held close to her heart. When she came to me, she said, "I don't want to fight anymore. I'm tired of being strong." I nodded, because strength isn't always the answer. Sometimes what we need is softness. Sometimes what we need is breath. I taught her the technique. She practiced it daily. Not as a chore, not as a ritual, but as a lifeline. Each exhale became a way for her body to release stories she no longer needed. Stories that weighed her down. Stories that shaped her suffering. Weeks later, she came back and said, "I think I'm learning what peace feels like." And that is the miracle. Peace is not something you find outside yourself. It is something you create inside yourself. Breath is one of the tools that builds that peace, breath by breath, moment by moment. But I want to give you one more story, one that reveals something deeper about human nature. There was a man named Isaac who came to my office after a major life transition. His children had moved out. His career had slowed. His identity was dissolving faster than he could rebuild it. He wasn't depressed, but he felt lost, drifting in a quiet sadness that didn't have a name. One day, in the middle of a session, he paused mid-sentence, closed his eyes, and let out a long, natural sigh, the same pattern as the physiological sigh. When he opened his eyes, he said, "Why does that feel like both surrender and strength? Because that is what breath teaches us. Surrender is not the opposite of strength. Surrender is the foundation of strength. You let go, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. You exhale, not because you are giving up, but because you are making space for what you need. You pause, not because you are falling behind, but because you are allowing your body to reset, recover, recalibrate. Breath is where healing begins. And now, I want to speak to you directly. There are parts of your life you've handled alone for too long. There are storms you've walked through quietly. There are fears you've swallowed. There are stresses you've normalized. There are emotions you've postponed. There are moments when you needed to breathe but didn't know how. You are not alone in that. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are human. And your breath, this simple, accessible, powerful breath, is your return to yourself. Not someday. Not when life gets better. Not after the chaos settles. But right now, in this moment, with one inhale, and another, and one long, steady exhale. You deserve the peace that follows. You deserve the clarity that emerges. You deserve the strength that comes from stillness. Your body is ready to heal. Your nervous system is ready to reset. Your breath is ready to guide you home.